Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Journey Journals. My name is Gaia from Life of Gaia, and today's interview is going to be all about redefining what is healing and the healing journey. Now, let me explain. Healing has become very much of a buzzword these days. There's healing from PTSD, from childhood trauma, from a bad breakup, or any other type of healing. But today with me is Cesar Rodriguez, who leads men's circles, and he is going to help me redefine what it means to heal. And instead of just healing from specific events and elements, it's really how to integrate the various parts of ourselves into a state of wholeness. Welcome, Cesar.
Wonderful. That was so amazingly said. Thank you, Guy. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. It's great to have you here, and I'm excited about our discussion. So, Caesar, let's start off straight away. You run men's circles, right? And
Yes.
where a lot of healing takes place. And I wanted to ask you, in your words, what is healing and what are some of the misconceptions that exist around healing?
That's a great question, Gaia. So, the to be able to communicate in this day and age as human beings, we needed language, right? So we made up words and gave them definitions. So the word heal or healing has a certain definition. Like if you cut yourself, you're gonna put something on it to try to heal your cut. But there is this other definition of the word healing as we've come to use it that doesn't quite do justice to the process that we're talking about. So, what we're referring to is, as you said at the beginning, is a process of what Carl Jung called the individuation. Right? Carl Jung was the founder of Jungian psychology and almost the father of men's work. And he talked about how, as we go through life, we seem to fragment ourselves into these different aspects or archetypal phenomenons. And, we wear a mask as well. He called it persona, right? To try to be a certain way where people are going to accept us. And there's so much depth to that. So I've come to define it. I'm not even going to be specific to just human beings. I'm just going to talk about healing. So healing means that something is being what it really is. That is to be healed, right? Something being what it is.
Incredible. So, could you define? I mean, I know you have, but could you define healing in sort of spiritual and practical terms?
Yeah, absolutely. So healing in a in practical term might mean like, oh man, I need to, I broke my leg. I need to heal my leg, right? Or I have this rash on my arm. I need to heal my arm. So there's that, and then there's also like healing from like PTSD, right? Maybe you could be a war veteran that experienced a lot of trauma, and now you're there and you're healing from that PTSD from experiencing and witnessing all those traumatic events. But the truth is, as Gabor Mate has really just pioneered the way out there, that we're all in need of healing. We all, there's not a single human being in the world that did not experience a certain level of trauma, therefore a certain level of wounding. And the practical terms of, if you cut your arm, it's pretty easy to see, oh, look, I have a cut in my arm. But just like we would have a cut in our arm, we all have wounds within our other subtle body. We can call this the emotional body that also needs healing. And many spiritual teachers will actually agree to the fact that the reason the world is the way the world is, you see all this war and genocide and greed, is it all comes down to this, right? The fact that human beings haven't integrated their wounds, right? So, and it's from a spiritual perspective, what we're talking about is that healing our wounds and bringing them to a place of integration. Does that make sense?
Yes. Could you say a little bit more about that and explain a little bit more about what does it actually mean to integrate your wounds?
Right. So I'll just use myself as an example because why not? Right. So when I was 4 years old, I cut out a little paper heart and I gave it to a girl that I really liked in kindergarten. And I was like, here you go. She ran off with it. And then I don't know, maybe half an hour later, she came back upset at me. She started blaming me for something that her friend told her I did or something like that. And then she just crumbles up the heart and she's like, this heart, garbage. And she throws it on the floor. And it wasn't until I started doing a lot of my own work in personal development that this came up, like in my mid 20s. And I was like, oh, wow, an upset 4-year-old has been running my love life. So from that moment forward, up until like late 20s, every single woman that I had a crush on, I did not make a move on, you know, unless I had evidence first that she actually is interested in me. So the majority of them that I didn't have evidence for, I didn't make a move on, and I would just end up in the relationship with the safe ones, that sort of a thing. So that is just the perfect example of how one incident can create such a painful experience within a human being at a very young age that goes on to shape the way that we behave in life, right? We can call these patterns. Some people call them limiting beliefs. Another term is shadows, because these are beliefs that are in the darkness. They're in the shadows. We can't quite see it, right? When I was 15, 16, I wasn't walking around thinking like, oh, I'm not going to say anything to her because I have a deep fear of being rejected, and being vulnerable is painful. I didn't have that knowledge. That was all in the darkness, in the shadow. So bringing something to integration means first being able to discover, what are my wounds? What happened in my life that led me to operate in a way that is not in alignment with the truth of who I am? We can use the word authentic as well, right? Operate in a way that is not authentic to who I really am. It also requires to discover who I really am, right? Because otherwise, how am I going to know if something's authentic to me or not? So it's a whole other conversation there too. And once we've been able to discover, okay, these are my shadows, these are my patterns, then doing the work to bring them into a place of integration. What that means is allow myself to feel the feelings that I denied myself feeling.
Right.
That's step number 2, right? Step number 1 is discover what those wounds are. Step number 2 is, the reason it got ingrained in the body, the reason it got stuffed, was because it was too much to bear. The feeling was too much to bear, so therefore we stuffed it. And the body actually has a mechanism to pretty much absorb. This is the latest science too, and psychosomatics, right? The body has a mechanism to protect you, so it absorbs into the body the emotions that are too much for you to bear. So the second thing that there is to do is to allow the resurfacing of those emotions, to be able to fully feel them. And in modern society, we often encounter environments, or we grew up in environments where parents almost like don't really want their kids to cry. We tell them like, to kids, hey, don't cry. Or like, you want a good reason to cry if you grew up in Central America like me. So we have this ingrained idea of like, okay, I'm not supposed to cry, so we don't want people to like see us sad, right? So we stuff our grief, our sadness, and our anger, and we don't allow it to move. So that's why I'm fascinated with this other definition of the term healing, because healing simply means allowing something to be what it is, including our emotions. If sadness came up, something happened that brought up sadness, then allowing that sadness to fully be is the medicine, right? So that is the second stage. Once that wave has passed, and it might take a while, and it might be hours and hours of emotional release that needs to happen, then you're able to, from this lighter place where you're not stuffed or repressed anymore, you're a little bit more free. You're able to now just give yourself as an adult that which you didn't receive, that you wanted to receive as a child, or whenever that happened. You might have been a teenager, you might have been a young adult, like at 21, maybe you experienced a really bad breakup, right? So give yourself that love that you didn't receive from that other person, or whoever at that age. By the way, a devastating breakup at 21 is probably because of some unhealed trauma from a very young age. And now you were projecting that expectation on that boyfriend or girlfriend. So that's that last piece. If we were to break down as simply as possible, first discover, then feel fully, allow it to move through, and then self-resource, right? Provide yourself that which you were wanting, right? Self-resource, and until you're able to like really hold it in your own adulthood, and hold your heart in your hand, metaphorically, to have it feel safe. And now, again, I went back to myself. Now I can actually approach a woman that I don't have any evidence that she likes me, But because I was able to recognize that pattern, allow the grief of it, and then recognize whenever that pattern wanted to run and start to give myself what I was wanting, which is love, give myself self love, then that need for approval carries less weight in my case, right? So now if I ask her out to dinner, she says no, it's just no big deal. I can move on with life, right? So that's actually what happened in my life. I mean, now I have a beautiful partner and a child, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to have that in my life if I hadn't moved through this process. I could be in some other kind of relationship of codependency where I really need, which was most of my relationships, where I really need the approval of that person. She needs to treat me like Prince Charming, because the moment she doesn't, I make it mean she doesn't love me, right? So anyway, don't want to go off in too much of a tangent there, but does that kind of paint the process for you, or what do you think?
Yeah, it was a great example. Thank you for sort of outlining that and walking us through it. I had one question. Going back to the discovering and feeling stage, okay?
Hmm.
And speaking into the safety aspect of it, okay? And this is not to diminish or minimize it, but one thing is like a kid at school giving, a card. How does one get someone who, for example, is suffering from like severe PTSD and has watched their friend blow up in front of them in war, or because sometimes revisiting that trauma is so painful, but so painful that it's actually almost impossible for them to re-enter that space. So
Hmm.
my question is, how does one invite a person into that space and create safety for them to allow the discovery and the feeling of it to then move into the next space?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I want to say is I am not a trauma expert, right? Some of my own experience and learning from trauma experts to guide me, and there's different ways to approach it, right? So this is where we get into trauma informed therapy, right? So there are trauma informed therapies where you're not fully bringing that person into full presence of their trauma, like all right, perfect, sit there, this is what happened, feel it all, like that could just end up in a
Mm,
re-traumatizing experience, and that could take that person off into a very challenging mental and emotional place, right? So that's why trauma informed therapy is so important. And then I guess we're kind of getting into just different levels of trauma and healing, right? So it's important to know what is at hand, to know what method or healing modality to implement. Initially, we were referring to the trauma or wounding that everybody has experienced, which is that developmental trauma, right?
mhm,
Everybody has a healing journey ahead of them, simply because you're a human being
mm,
and you grew up with parents that are flawed human beings who them themselves are traumatized from with their own developmental trauma at the very least, right? So yeah, that's on one hand. On the other hand, you've got very severe situations like what you just mentioned, right? Somebody with PTSD from watching their friend like be killed in front of them at war. So that would have perhaps a different approach with a trauma specialist. So yeah, we could talk about those separately.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you for answering that. Cesar, what are some of the pitfalls that you see happening with traditional healing? And we spoke about this before the interview, that we see a lot of people going into different healing modalities, but they seem to be sort of stuck in a loop of sorts.
Hmm.
That it's the same
Yes.
story being perpetuated over and over again.
Yeah. So that's such an important point, and it's very nuanced. So let's see if we can get into it in a way that makes sense for people listening. So ironically, there is kind of a weird kind of like joy that gets experienced when somebody discovers a wound, because now they have this other thing that they can point to as the reason that justifies why they haven't been able to create the life that they want. So it's almost like it provides us a like this validation for like, oh, well, this is why I can't have the relationship that I want, because my mother treated me this way, you see? And then it's almost like uncovering a mystery as well. And that alone is its payoff in and of itself, right? Like, oh yeah, like this is why I have this limiting belief, or this is why I feel this way around people. So those are two different reasons why there's a bit of a payoff that people seem to enjoy. And sometimes we just kind of stop there. Or we get stuck in step two, which is just like I need to feel that pain and feel that pain. And the thing about this pain, which is the another pitfall here, is to a certain extent you'll never really exhaust it, right? Like you can exhaust it to the point where you've exhausted it enough. By exhausting, I mean like you allowed that pain to resurface, to fully feel it. You did that grief work. You can get to the point where you've done that enough to kind of move on. Moving on is also going to require a whole new way of operating and doing life that is unfamiliar, and that alone has its hazards and scary factor to it. Like, wow, now I have to like really create the life I love. Like, can I go out there and become an entrepreneur? I don't know. Can I go out there and approach a woman and talk to her like feeling confident in myself and my body? I don't know. Well, you know what? Actually, the thing is, I'm just wounded. I have this pain. I need to feel that pain, right? So sometimes the discomfort of the pain is more comfortable or safer than the discomfort of the unknown,
Mm.
right? So those are a few pitfalls that we could talk more about.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to just segue a little bit into another arena. You make use of psilocybin as a tool, mainly in your healing work. And I know you've received some incredibly insightful messages in your work with psilocybin. If you feel
Mhm.
open to, I'd love for you to share some of those.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. I've had three like full-on psilocybin journeys, and I've done a little bit of microdosing here and there. And I've also done other plant medicine that has been equally rich in value to me. With psilocybin, basically what we're talking about right now, that was in my last psilocybin journey where this clearer definition of healing came through. And this is a beautiful thing about plant medicine. Sometimes you receive this blessing of like just complete simplicity, something that we've been stuck with trying to figure out in our mind is just kind of laid in front of you like this is actually just the way it is, boom, it's right there. I'm like, oh wow, all I need to do to move on in my life is just like this one thing, that yeah, that's the only thing. Anyway, so one of the things for me was this thing about healing. Like what does it mean? Oh, it just means something is being what it is, right? For example, there's an eagle who for some reason the egg rolled off the nest and he hatched in a pen of chickens. Now the eagle is pecking the ground, even though he's full adult, still pecking the ground, hasn't ever gone for a big, long flight, right? That eagle is unhealed. And most of us human beings, that's exactly how we live life, like a eagle pretending to be a chicken. So the healing process for that eagle would just simply be that the eagle starts being an eagle, right? So something starts being what it is. So that was profound for me because it really inspired me to really look at my own life and see, okay, where am I not being fully who I am? Right? What's the truth of who I am? That's again the other side of the work, right? Like being able to discover fully and meet myself fully in my own essence of who I am so that then I can go on and express in the world, in my life, who I am, right? Just like that eagle, he needs to discover that he's an eagle first so that he can then go and express his eagleness of soaring and above the clouds, and catching snakes with its claws. So I hope this is making sense to somebody.
Thank you. It is. And thank you for sharing that. Cesar, where do you see, having done all this work and having provided this very interesting reframing and I guess redefining of healing, where do you see it moving into in the future?
You know what? I mean, I choose to believe that we are moving into a future where we even develop a new word for it. Maybe integration is the word, right? We move into a future where this work of deep inner healing becomes something that's commonplace as much as exercising at the gym. We human beings, we live in this material world, and it has blinded us from seeing that which we cannot see with our eyes, right? That which we can see with our eyes is only a very tiny small fraction of reality. So since we can see our bodies and the way our stomachs look, the way our arms look, We go to like make them look better. I need to make shrink my stomach. I need to make my arms bigger, right? Because you can see it, right? But if we could only see in the mirror like the unintegrated wounds, imagine that, then people would then go to the emotional gym, you know? So I believe in a future like that, that people will take on their own inner healing process. I live in a community in a town that a lot of the people are actually drawn here for that reason. They themselves are in their own inner healing journey. So it's really beautiful to see people inspired to do the work. The guidance is lacking in this field. So you do meet a lot of some people that are in one of those pitfalls, either perpetually discovering their wounds or perpetually just sitting in their pain. But hey, at least they're trying. So I believe that the guidance is going to become more and more clear. The process is going to become more and more also clear and accessible for people. And we will move towards what Carl Jung called individuation, the integration of the self.
Very much looking forward to that. Cesar,
Me
what is
too.
your message to the world around healing?
My message to the world is that you do your inner healing. So take the time to just be with yourself. If there's an opportunity that you have to just go out into nature, even if it's like a cabin trip, even just for a week without distractions, do that, because that's where you'll discover what you haven't been willing to face. And I can say that from my own experience. And once you face that, then you'll have your work cut out for you, and you can start moving in that direction, right? Discover the wounds, feel the pain, provide yourself the love and the safety that you didn't receive when you were younger.
Thank you for that. And
Yeah.
Cesar, I want to acknowledge you for always doing your own inner healing work, for taking the time to explore and spend time with consciousness and all these beautiful messages that you come back with and that you share with the world, and for always, stepping out and following your heart, okay? But then using it to not take things at surface value, but actually redefining them, and then sort of sharing that new definition or that redefining with the world and providing guidance to others. I think it's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Gaia, and thank you so much for providing this beautiful platform where we can share these messages, and we get to encourage people to take on their own inner healing journey, and normalize the idea that everyone has trauma. Right? Big thank you to Gabor Mate out there, who's doing incredibly beautiful pioneering work, and many others as well. Right? So thank you. It was a pleasure being here with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. And for those of you who have been watching us and who have followed along, if you have questions for Cesar, please feel free to put them in the comments. Please like, share, and stay tuned for other interviews that we've done some great ones with Cesar. He's a wealth of information, and I highly encourage you to reach out to him. We'll be putting the information about his website and his men's circles in the comments below. And so that's all for now. Thank you so much, Cesar.
Thank you, Gaia.